We made it to episode 6. Let's see if we can do it without a take, because I think every episode we've had has taken at least 2 or 3 attempts. But Gordon, how's your week been? Let's start off with
Hello, Neil. That was a lovely intro. It has been one of those things where, every week we've had something go wrong. But I think week number 1 it didn't go wrong. Did it? Maybe it did.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was good. Internet was fine.
Weird. But, we're on episode 6, and I'm quite pleased that we've got there. Neil's drinking water. I'm drinking a lovely Stellenbosch Merlot, because wife, Mrs. Greenhorn, Laura, she did a wonderful little surprise Valentine's dinner thing for us, which is amazing, actually.
Early Valentine's Day.
Very early. Just to put that it's just a nice surprise.
Yeah.
You don't get much time. We don't get much time together. Neil will know all these things. Any dads and mums and dads and whatever else, working parents. You don't get much time together, so it's very nice for her to do that. So, to be honest, if this week ended today, I'm a happy man with a full belly and very delighted. But the week overall, happy. Start of the week was hard, properly hard, because we were filming a course. We did 27 lessons in 2 days on a Skillshare course at work. And
wow.
That's just pretty heavy.
How long's an episode?
They're kind of anywhere between about 10 and 20 minutes, depending on sort of which one. But it's more like your brain, or my brain in particular, is concentrating a lot. I'm constantly thinking about what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and you're doing that for the best part of 6, 7, 8 hours straight, which is hard. That's not an easy thing to do. So you feel pretty wiped out. But then, the Thursday and Friday actually I started to feel a bit better, because ultimately it kind of calmed down a touch, where I don't know, there was just admin stuff that I needed to get on with, and we managed to sort of improve. I just had admin stuff to do, which was nice, because I've got a to-do list that's as long as you can possibly imagine. So I managed to get through a lot of that, and some of the tasks that some of the team were asking me to do, I managed to get through that. And generally felt pretty good. And I'm also pretty sure, I don't know if it was this week or last week, maybe it was this week, I've really got into 35mm film photography. So I think you were there when I was taking some pictures with my camera.
I've had a wee shot of your camera.
So I really got into that. And I think on Tuesday night, I went out and used a 35mm film stock called Cine Still 800T, which is basically they take motion picture film and they remove a layer of it and basically put it into a 35mm camera, and you get these kind of cool effects that come from it. The halations, which are kind of like halos around lights, and it's good for nighttime because it's 800 ISO, so it's kind of light sensitive. So I went out in London, just walked around and took pictures with a camera, which is the first time I've done that in, I can't think of how long, a long time. So I felt really good doing that, and I should do more of that. Because when your hobby becomes your job, your hobby shouldn't become your job, because it kind of ruins your hobby. which it doesn't ruin. It still means I'm having a lot of fun when I'm at work, but it still means that I don't do the things that I would just do for the sake of doing them because I really enjoy it. I'm now a bit fatigued because I've been, I don't know, filming Ali all day or taking pictures all day. I do less of the stuff that matters to me. But anyway,
It's probably a good question for the audience. Why? I know the answer to this, but why have you chosen 35mm to kind of play around with? And
I love it. I love it because this delayed sense of gratification. And it's really funny because I took a picture. I think I took a picture of Ali with a 35mm film camera, and he immediately almost wanted to see the preview. But life doesn't work like that. You don't get that sense of you can't show what you've just done really, or what's expected in the future. You have to wait. You do something. You work hard at it, just like the gym. And then eventually, a few months later, you'll look in the mirror and you go, "Oh, looking all right." But then also, 80 years later, you also then realize that the gym helped keep your bones strong and your muscles big, so you don't die, or die less horrendously, maybe. So it's kind of, I know that's kind of stretched quite far from me just talking about 35mm film photography, but that delayed sense of gratification where I've taken a picture, I have no idea what I've taken a picture of. But
and you've got to find out number. I mean, each film's 20 pictures,
and that as well. You're much more considered. When I've got a digital camera, I'm just popping off shots. But the Scottish
Yeah.
in me is already saying that this 35mm, every time I take a picture, it's like £1. But it's also that considered approach, because I don't know what I've taken, so I want to make sure it's a good picture. So I think about what I'm doing. I stop. I watch my surroundings. I'm not just there going clock, 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 clock. Like my big digital camera can do 14 frames a second.
Yeah.
Like that would be done in 2 seconds almost on a film camera.
What's your thoughts on these, like, is it Instapic, or the ones you print out?
It's still digital photography, because you can still choose whether you print it or not, and you can still review it and look back on it. I'd also say that the standard and quality of it is pretty low. It's a smaller sensor. You take better pictures on your phone camera, but 35mm photography, it's basically like the film on it is basically like the sensor that's in your digital camera. It's light sensitive. It picks it up and then it basically embeds the image on the film.
Yeah,
but there's something when I think I've showed you some of the pictures that I've taken. I set up an Instagram page, Greenhorn 35mm Greenhorn, or Greenhorn 35mm, and there's something on those pictures that has like a texture. There's like something like a kind of like there's a nostalgic type of kind of feeling that you get from looking at those pictures. And I don't edit them. They're straight out of camera.
Yeah.
So. The film aspect of things makes a big difference, and the Instastack stuff, it's good and it's helpful and it's kind of cool for like a wedding and stuff, but it's still the digital photography. I think you're just printing it off there and then.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's actually on Isla's birthday list.
Yeah, my suggestion on that, to be honest, I don't know what I'd do for her. I think that amateurs or people who don't really understand photography probably shouldn't get into film photography until they start to learn a little bit about it. And yeah, the Instax thing would probably be pretty good, because you can review the pictures and you can kind of like audit them a little bit before she just prints everything. Yeah. Like she's taking a picture of like the ceiling.
Yeah.
Anyway, enough about me, Neil. How was your week?
My week, it was good, quick. Like I was looking back and thinking, wow, it's 5-6 days gone. But it's been good. I worked from home the whole week, which I do and I don't enjoy. I think I'm looking forward to, and we can get into this in another episode about my work and what I do. But essentially, I work for a startup. We used to have a WeWork office, which, if anybody doesn't know, WeWork is great. Environment, free beer, that kind of thing. Loved going there. But cost constraints and that kind of thing, we closed it down, and yeah, it's just not the same vibe. We've got a place to work, but it doesn't have the same vibe as WeWork. So there's news coming. I was hoping I could tell you this episode about it live, but I can't yet. Hopefully it's going to be signed and sealed on Monday, and then I can share a bit more about what I do and the journey over the next kind of 18 months. And that should see us get an office.
There is something about this whole going to work thing, right? There's something about going to the gym. There's something about going to work. There's something about home and what that represents. I do, and I think the pandemic for me realised that there is that. I find it very difficult to decompartmentalise my brain and say, I can exercise at home. Well, sure, it's probably pretty convenient and it's probably quite easy to be able to do. But it's quite nice going to the gym. And equally, it's still also quite nice to go to work.
Yeah. So when we get to the office, I'll be there 2-3 days a week. Looking forward to that. Back on my e-bike.
We should do it like we do our team meetings at work. Any personal wins?
Personal wins. I got back into running, so took a couple of weeks off.
Why was that, Neil?
Not going to mention the word.
Did something happen?
Yeah, so not going to mention that.
Oh.
I'm going to go without an episode. But yeah, back to running. Done about 20 miles this week. Got a long run in tomorrow, so that'll be up to 30 miles.
Fantastic.
That'll be good. On the road to my ultra, whenever that's going to be. So that's a personal win. Another personal win was today. I had my Fridays off and put a breakfast bar up in our kitchen, which is nice. As soon as I did it, the kids wanted to have their dinner there, which was quite nice, quite funny. But yeah, that was a highlight. And went out for drinks with Dad last night.
Oh, nice. Where'd you go?
First time, just a local pub, maybe 10 minutes from the house. First time since COVID, so first time since he moved down we've been to the pub, which is mad for anyone
Who invited
not
who?
following. I instigated it.
Good. I'm actually thinking, dude, we ended the last podcast. I was like, how can we get Dad on the podcast? Because I like to get Mum on the podcast as well. But wouldn't it be cool to interview Dad?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, I don't know if he listens to these. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But I'm trying to think of ways we can like get him in. But I think we could probably set him up. We could buy him like a little lav mic or something, and he could probably set up his phone, and he could join the Riverside chat, and then it would sound pretty good. And then we'll prepare the questions ahead of time and give it to him. And then I think if we get him a couple of beers, like send him some Cloudwater beers or something, I think that'd be quite good. You figure that work?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I haven't planted the seed yet, and he may be listening to this. Don't know.
Plant the seed, Neil. Go for it. I think we should do it because I think it'd be fun. Like, imagine immortalising. Like, we're immortalising our conversations. Why wouldn't we immortalise a conversation with Mum and Dad? I think that'd be quite fun.
Yeah.
Right. This week's episode, Neil kind of came up with the idea of going into this one. I've taken a few notes and certainly have some pretty strong opinions. Like, even me and Laura were kind of getting into it over the Valentine's dinner. We were chatting about the idea of this. And it largely goes around the idea of social media. And we kind of wanted to discuss just social media in general. Like, we're both in our 30s. Neil was born in 91, I was born in 87. So we didn't... Like, Instagram certainly didn't exist. Facebook almost didn't exist, even in our teenage years. So we've kind of gone through the period of where the internet didn't exist, mobile phones were still progressing, to now where we have these computers in our pockets that are run on algorithms and tracking and all sorts of things with Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever else. And equally, Neil also has a different perspective, perhaps, because he has a 7-year-old, he has two 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and I have like a 6-month-old, so she doesn't even know what day it is, let alone what an iPhone is. So Neil probably has a slightly different perspective to me, but equally, Neil works in the sort of, I'd describe as a bit of a corporate startup world, whereas I built my career off the back of social media, essentially. So I'm sure we can get into this and probably talk a bit more about the positives, negatives, and how we feel about it, and what we think the potential future of social media is. So yeah, Neil, I think you crack off. Like, you start with like what are your thoughts on social media? How do you feel about it generally? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Do you think we need to turn it off? We need to regulate it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good topic to discuss because even in the office and in talking to friends and stuff, it comes up. So I think we'll do it in 2 parts. We'll start with our perspective and stuff, and then I'll chat about, and you can chip in about the whole child stuff and how you monitor and when's the right time. But my perspective of social media, and it's gone through different, I was thinking about this, and it's gone through different kind of phases. So I'd say, let's go back to when I was maybe 20, 21, and social media was kind of kicking off. I think Instagram was probably something. Maybe stories wasn't a thing. Stories has kind of changed the way people use social media, but certainly taking good pictures and stuff started when I was about 20, 21. And not necessarily wanted to show off, but I kind of got into photography. I got into that creative element of taking a picture, maybe adding a filter to it and making it look a bit better or making it look a bit different and posting it online. And I think it was pretty, what's the word?
Fun? Was it
innocent?
Yeah, was there like a when you say innocent, was you were just doing it because it was fun? Yeah.
I wasn't on the road to try and get likes and try and get follows and stuff. But then that was kind of phase 2.
But then did you quite like it when people liked it? And did that then sort of reinforce the feeling of fun? So you took some pictures because you quite liked it, but then people were like, "Oh, this is cool," and people were liking it, whatever else, and then it creates this kind of like loop of, "Oh, well, if I make this thing, people like me. If I make this thing, people like me. Oh, but if people don't like me, then maybe they like me less." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'd say there's 3 phases in my social media thought process usage. Phase 1 was taking photos, thinking it was fun, not really doing it to get any kind of following likes. Phase 2, on the other hand, that went a bit different, and I got kind of asphyxiated with the people that are making money out of social media, people that are on brand deals, people that are kind of getting large followings for doing stuff. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to get a bit of that. So I started posting more. I started posting more of my life stuff. Or I'm having a coffee here, or I'm eating this sandwich, or that kind of thing. And maybe that's when stories came. And I actually went down a bit of a rabbit hole of just wanting to get followers, to a point where I was starting to look at like bots and stuff, and go down that route. Maybe I can't remember how old I was, but I thought if I can get my follower count up, then maybe I could start making money from it, and maybe it could be a bit of a career, a bit of a side hustle. And that, I don't know what's made the switch from phase 2 of like being obsessed with getting likes, getting followers and stuff, to phase 3, which I'd say I'm in now, and I'd very seldom post something that I find interesting, maybe a couple of pictures of my kids, or when we go to Sky. But I'd say maybe on average a handful of times a month I would post on social media. And I can't remember, and I was trying to look back, I can't remember what made the switch. Maybe because I thought, and I think talking about this interesting, I didn't want to be that, I didn't want to come across as self-obsessed and showy-offy, and making a career out of social media, I think, takes a type of person I didn't want to become.
Isn't that just maturity?
It could be a maturity thing. I've kind of grown up, obviously, kids, that kind of thing. So it could be a maturity thing.
Because maturity is also like a realization of priorities, right? It's kind of part of your life when your priority is almost yourself. There's kind of like a level of lack of empathy and understanding and sympathy and like an emotional intelligence aspect. But when you have children, your emotional intelligence basically accelerates very, very quickly and almost intrinsically. So within yourself, you just simply become more emotionally intelligent because you have this child that would die if you did not provide for them. So there's kind of like, it seems like there's something going on there where there was just basically a young man trying to make it in the world. And you're like, how the hell do I do this? Well, status is quite an important thing. And having a bunch of followers and a bunch of likes, they're like, hey, this is me, like, this is me having some status. Like, people like my stuff. Because I think when we're young, we want feedback. We want to know whether we're doing something right and wrong, because we don't really know what we're doing. We're just kind of like, we think we can maybe show bravado and confidence or whatever else, but actually we've got this fragile confidence that's inside us. And it kind of sounds like you're talking about the idea of like basically maturity. You're going through a period where you were just kind of young, naive, and looking to sort of build some weird status. You didn't know what that was, to then ultimately you've had a kid, got married, got a mortgage, like done all the responsible adult stuff, and now your emotional intelligence is accelerated, and you're like, this is ridiculous. Why am I doing this?
I think you're probably right. And I think just looking at people that are even older than me and on social media and posting their every movement, posting every picture, it's just, I find it, I now look at it as being, that individual as being a bit self-obsessed and attention-seeking, showing-offy, all that kind of traits. I just don't, even if you, and you've got a different perspective because you've tried to run a business through it, or you have run a business through it, and you've got a lot of friends who have got successful businesses through it. I wouldn't want to be in that line of work. It's just not something. But
it's because I think most people use social media. There's actually a book called Selfie, written by a chap called Will Storr, which is in fact is a podcast coming out soon on Ali Abdaal Deep Dive. If you want to listen to it, but I didn't realise I wasn't part of the team at that time. But he wrote a book called Selfie, and I found it absolutely fascinating. So yeah, if anyone's out there listening, the book Selfie by Will Storr is absolutely fantastic. But it looked at more of the idea of like where. By the way, this is me remembering the book, so I might be wrong in my interpretation. But my interpretation of it was essentially that he was talking about how social media came about, and we have this conflict where we think that the social media companies are the ones like controlling us. They're the ones with the algorithms, with the gamification, all the things that are contributing towards our obsession and our addiction to social media. But partly, I think some of the argument he makes in the book is that it's the the individual human element that drives the social media, that drives Facebook. So Facebook is largely a vehicle for our innate human behaviors. Mm-hmm. Because it's basically just accelerates it's a status game. Look at me. I'm worth something. Like me. You know, this is the kind of the social construct of like or caveman days, because you die as an individual caveman, but you don't when you're a collective, when you have people that are helping you, protect you, and all that kind of stuff. So it's like this weird, like, where before it was more about trying to get 10 mates who were in a little village and you just wanted to light a fire, to now you can have be Cristiano Ronaldo and have 401 million people follow you. Like that, and see every inch of your life, left, right, and centre, and basically validate your opinions and your decisions. Like, that's mental. Like, how does that happen? So the book kind of talks about that kind of thing. And if you recognise that, if you recognise that social media is this ridiculous status game, and you recognise that playing it is just a self-defeating prophecy, then I think you can fly with it, and I think you can make a lot of money. Like,
yeah, no, you're probably right, but it comes down to that. How do you get that understanding and that knowledge and the kind of the safety tools to not get obsessed with it and not have it impact your mental health and not believe everything that's on it.
And I think that comes down to there's you have your IQ, so you have your intelligence quotient, if you will, and it's largely determined by your genetics. So you're sort of born with a level of intellect. How that's measured is perhaps has a level of controversy, and whether it's valid or not. But it's fixed. It's fundamentally fixed. So when you're born, it's how smart you are, if you want to call it that. But there's also something called the rational quotient, which is the RQ. And RQ is malleable, so it's something that you can get better at. And having a rational brain means that you can think about these things. You can see something in front of you and say, is this a good deal for me? It's like a mortgage. If you look at the kind of interest rates that you're doing, if the deposits you put down, the fixed rates, the variable rates, you can then come to a balanced conclusion of some kind. Is this good for me? It's similarly if you go on social media. If you're following people who are playing this status game, this thing where they're stood next to a Ferrari, you can stand there, you look at that picture and go, do they own that Ferrari? And you can be like, maybe they do own the Ferrari. Okay, well, how do they own it? Is it owned via credit? Is it owned via their mum and dad who have paid for it? Is it owned because they worked bloody hard and they could afford it? I'm almost certain that people who own Ferraris don't necessarily post their Ferrari on social media that have worked really hard for it and built a business and whatnot. It's probably more people that are on large amounts of debt, or it's not even their car and they're just stood next to it. So I think how we combat it is largely down to a rational mind. It's about questioning what we see. And you don't have to do that all the time. Like, you don't have to follow these people. You can unfollow them. Like, I don't have people on my social media pages that are status game players. I have people on my social media following that, I don't know, they're good at design, so I like to see how they design things. Or they're friends who I really respect and love and care about, and I want to see what they're up to. And in fact, I want to see what they're up to because I want to be like, hey, that's cool. I want you to keep doing that because you're going to be successful. So I guess, and I suppose one of my questions is, have you thought about how you're going to then translate that type of like thing that you're going through now, that third stage? How are you then talking to Isla, your 7-year-old, about this? How are you instilling this rational mindset, this discussion about what's real and what's not real, and what makes you worthy and what doesn't make you worthy? Have you thought about that?
Not really, to be honest. I've actually recently been looking at kind of books to educate myself on best way to approach it, because I think it needs to be discussed, especially when I think parents have a big influence, and I don't think people realise how big an influence parents have in their child's upbringing and what they become when they're older and that kind of thing. And also,
I think we overplay that a bit. I think you do have an influence on your children, but I think there's the kind of the cliche idea of what will be. Like if Isla wants to do something, she will do it. That's freedom of spirit, freedom of will.
I agree, but I don't think people realise how switched on children are.
Oh,
maybe
repetition-wise, absolutely. Like, they'll copy what you're doing and how you're doing it. But what my question is largely, I think you could even bestow. You could be like the guide, right? You could be the guide in terms of what she does. Sorry, I'm giving unsolicited advice, but I'm actually I'm curious if you actually agree with it, because I'm keen to know that maybe my approach with Olivia might be a bit different, or if you have some ideas on it. But you can't take away TikTok from Isla, and I say this because I think that then instills, it's like alcohol, it's like drugs, it's like curfews. She will rebel, but if you discuss with her what it's about and what's maybe good and what's bad about it, then you start to empower them a little bit. And it's that kind of, maybe it's that growth mindset aspect of things, rather than it being a cut off and saying, no, you're not allowed to do this. It's more, it's probably not good that you do it every day, but maybe we do it once a week, and maybe we get creative with it.
It's a very good point, and we could look at how she uses things like Netflix and YouTube. She doesn't get YouTube that much, but in terms of Netflix, Amazon Prime and stuff on her she's got an iPad thing. She'll come to us if she thinks something looks scary or something doesn't look like she should be watching it. So is it Halloweeny? Is it got monsters in it? Is it just doesn't look right? She'll come to us and say, is this okay for me to watch?
That's amazing.
So we've done that kind of aspect of it, where like that's all kind of media content and videos and stuff, but we haven't yet done social media. But I think the time is coming soon, because her friends have got unsolicited access to social media platforms.
Uncontrolled, not necessarily unsolicited.
Yeah, uncontrolled, which definitely worries me, because these girls are 6 years old. Isla's one of the oldest in her year, and they come over with their iPads and their phones and stuff, and parents may be listening, but things aren't locked down, and that's what worries me. So in these apps you can have kind of parent guardian accounts where you can toggle things on and off and have things, and that's what we want to do for Isla. But when she has her friends that come over that don't have any kind of toggles on off or things that are hidden, then that kind of raises the question, because fair enough, we can educate her on things not being right, but when you've got soft porn or somebody chopping someone's head off in a game type stuff, I think there's a limit to that. You can say, yeah, you shouldn't be watching it, but maybe she clicked on it by mistake, or maybe she was scrolling through it and it just appeared. And I think, yeah, you can do all the education you want, but I think there's still those safeguards you need to put in place.
Yeah, because you would, in America, I remember when we travelled there some 5 years ago or something, one of the friends that we stayed with when we were there, they had to basically have discussions with parents and ask them, do you have a gun in the house? Right? And it's like, is the gun locked up? Is it safe? And then you have to have the discussion with your child about, don't touch the gun. That's not something it's not a toy. You shouldn't play with it. And maybe that's an extreme example, but it's almost as if that's kind of an example with what you're kind of discussing there, is where there are implications for uncontrolled social media. Because it's unfortunately not regulated enough or controlled enough, or it doesn't even have a regulating body, I don't think. I think they're all self-controlled, which is mad in itself. But there's almost that effect. But equally, in that scenario that I'm using as an example, guns will always exist. And in that country, they won't be taken away. So there has to be a way that, in a sense, that us as parents have to kind of like be like, well, what can we do? And I think what you're saying with the open and frank discussion and open communication portals that you have with Isla, I think that's what you should nurture as much as possible. So if she ever feels like she's seen something that she doesn't understand or feels scared about, that she can come to you and tell you about it. There's no closed circuitry there. It's a case of you're actually open to the discussion. If something's happened that you don't disagree with, Daddy won't be angry. Daddy actually wants to know about it, and he can be the mature, rational brain that can help you sort of dissect it, I suppose, and understand it, and then give her tools to be able to cope with it, I suppose. I think.
Yeah. It definitely it makes it harder when her best friend, for example, has a phone and is on TikTok and is consuming the content that I wouldn't necessarily think it is suitable. things like soft porn, things like girls dancing around with nothing on or very little on.
Yeah, and that must.
And age 6, I think. Yeah.
I'm not looking forward to that either. And that's you don't think it's good because you have that maturity and that rational brain. And when you're 6 and when you're 7, you don't really have that. And you're the guide. You're the one that helps them do it. And like I said, I think guns are always going to exist, just like social media is always going to exist. I think bad things are always going to exist. And ultimately, sure, there are probably differences in the fact that the social media is very accessible. It's unfortunately very accessible. But I think you hold the tools to help be able to sort of nurture your own children, help them think, help them talk to you, communicate, all those kind of things. Well, I at least hope so.
Yeah. So let's kind of take a rewind back. And what was your journey with social media?
Yeah, my journey with social media, I suppose, was kind of interesting because I don't think social media existed for me until I was probably 20, 21, to be honest. That would be my first sort of proper memory of social media, because it didn't exist. Like, mobile phones didn't exist until I was a teenager. Like, we still had dial-up internet. Do you know what I mean? So my first ideas of social media, but even before the traditional stuff that we talk about in terms of Facebook, probably came when I was in my sort of late teens, 18, 19, 20, when it was forums. It was like forums and websites. Yeah. That was social media. That was where you kind of discussed with people about things, you expressed ideas. And I remember, this is kind of like a funny thing of, Ali was interviewing a guy on his Deep Dive podcast called Julian Hearn, who is the co-founder of a company called Huel, which does these nutritionally complete vegan protein drinky things. But the other co-founder is a guy called James Collier. And James Collier run this website called muscletalk.co.uk. And muscletalk.co.uk
oh, wow.
was where...
I remember James.
Yeah, was where I basically sort of learned about bodybuilding. I posted my training programs, I talked to people on the forums, I did commentary for the UK BFF, which was a bodybuilding federation at the time. I went to Birmingham and did it twice for them. So James Collier was my first bodybuilding coach. When I won my Scottish Championships in 2009, he was a dietitian from the NHS, and he helped me essentially formulate my diet and get me into the best shape of my life, and I won the competition. That was my first sort of feeling of social media. It was a connection. It meant that I could speak to people that were the same as me. Like, I really loved the gym. I wanted to find out more about it. I could delve into the ideas of education on it, and we could discuss protocols and training and comparisons and all that kind of stuff. Because I was largely a solo trainer. I didn't really train with anyone. And then it also connected me with someone who was an NHS registered dietitian, who was someone who was into bodybuilding, and I got some good advice on how to get as lean as I could. And then social media progresses. It turns into something that was like Facebook, so the forums turned into apps, essentially, and Facebook was sort of born. And at this time I was a personal trainer. So I was training clients on the gym floor, working with people in a gym, and Facebook was just something that I was kind of playing with. It wasn't... I didn't really understand it. I can remember looking... when you're on Facebook and you look at the Facebook memories, and you look back at like 10, 12 years ago and you're like, God, I was such an idiot.
Mad. The comments you see in the photos you see.
I saw one of you in a headlock. I think you were doing something and someone commented on it.
Yeah.
And it's, there's very little things that are kind of egregious in terms of our behaviours, but sometimes it's just like, I couldn't even spell your or you are. Like, what am I doing? I'm such an idiot. Or two and two. Like, someone should have slapped me. But at the end of the day, it was something I suppose I recognised it as something, but I didn't really take it seriously. And then when I moved to London, I started working for a company called Ultimate Performance. Because I made that move as a personal trainer from working in kind of a fishing village in Aberdeen to then moving to the hub, the metropolitan, the centre of the world to a certain degree, London, you kind of get recognised for that a little bit, right? There's kind of people in the local community are like, "Oh, you've made a big move." And I remember like Scott Bapty had just started doing some lean files, I think he called it .com or something, where he was talking about his men's health cover model sort of journey. And he was really into Facebook, and he was building like quite an audience on it. And I think, I don't know why we reached out together, or there was some sort of connection, or I have no idea how I found out about him. But anyway, we met up and we had a chat when he came down to London. And he was talking about the sort of Facebook thing, and then we went to this thing called the ISENC, like the International Sports and Education Nutrition Conference, I think it was, somewhere. And we both joined it, and then he was talking a lot about this Facebook thing, like posting 9 o'clock in the morning, 12 in the afternoon, 5 p.m. every day. And I just started doing it. And that led me to about 3.5 years, 4 years maybe, of posting every day, almost every day, every week, every month, every year, 3 times a day. And that basically built me a business, like an online coaching business.
Yeah.
That sustained my ability to travel the world for 366 days. That's what 25 countries, took 40 flights. And bought me this house, effectively.
Yeah.
So we can talk about the dark sides of social media, and I absolutely accept them, but I also can't champion it enough for us, for our abilities to connect with people, to be able to be influenced. It's like we are the sum of the people that influence us. And if you pick those people right, especially through social media, you can connect with people you never even imagined you possibly could, and they could take you on a journey that ends up creating businesses and companies and things that you and giving you freedoms that you never even thought of. And then there was kind of like that kind of process, and I was thinking about this before we had this conversation about what was social media for me, and I get to the point where I'm now, where I'm head of production at a large YouTube company, essentially, or a big YouTuber. And social media, because YouTube's part of social media, right? It's not not just Facebook and Instagram and the negatives that come from that. I creatively consumed when I was watching YouTube. I creatively consumed when I was looking at Instagram things. I creatively consumed when I was on Facebook. I took inspiration, and I emulated people who were creating incredible content and essentially tried to do it myself. I stole like an artist. It was a book I've been reading, my third book of the year, Neil, that I've been reading. And Casey Neistat at the time was such an incredible artist in the sense he was creating these amazing vlogs. And I was like, hey, I want to make these. So if we hadn't had social media, we wouldn't have had the ability to essentially copy people or steal their ideas and then turn them into our own. Because if we hadn't had social media, or we didn't have this ability to connect to millions of people or discover people that would influence us, we'd have never discovered Casey Neistat. I'd have never discovered the ability to vlog. I'd have never sort of what would be classed as like wearing the suit, like wear the suit that you want, wear this suit to the job that you want.
Yeah.
And that's what I did, and that's what social media gave me. And I tried to stay away from that whole sort of idea of a status game. I suppose there's parts of me, there's the kind of like, I want to show people that I'm being successful and blah, 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 that kind of intrinsic, crappy caveman thing I was talking about before. But it for me, it was more about a mechanism to a means. It was something that was going to feed me, something that was going to make me successful. It didn't necessarily mean that I had to have loads of followers. It just means that I had to have, 1,000 true fans that wanted to buy from me.
Yeah. I think there's two interesting points there. I wonder if the first one being, does everybody go through the same phases? So people start posting on social media, they start getting likes and shares, then they start showing off more and doing more, or trying to do more stuff and that kind of thing, and then realise, what am I doing? Like, I know plenty of friends that have gone kind of, their usage of social media's kind of peaked, posted every day, and then they're kind of slowly coming back down. And I wonder if that's just something that everyone does.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the whole periodized model of maturity.
Yeah.
Like, when you're in your early years, you don't know where you sit in this status game. You don't know where you sit in the, like, am I smart? Am I not smart? Am I strong? Am I not strong?
Yeah.
Am I a good runner? Am I not a good runner? Am I funny? Am I not funny? Am I a geek? Am I not a geek? Am I IT or am I a firefighter? So I think social media allows you to be able to play those games. It allows you to be able to put yourself out there and be like, hey, am I really, really, really good looking? So do I get loads of like DMs from girls going, you're really, really good looking? Do you know what I mean? So I think when we're younger, we just play those status games, and where previously it might have been in the gym, or it might have been in a running race at school, sports games or something, where you'd be like, I'm an athletic type of person. And that's what maybe I did when I was going to the gym when I was a teenager. I was typically stronger than people. I was typically building muscle faster than people. So that kind of tiered up my status game. I knew that I was a gym person. That's what I did. That's where my levels fit. It wasn't becoming a doctor. It wasn't becoming an academic. It was, getting in the gym and lifting weights. So I guess that's kind of where it comes from, because then you get to that point and you realise where you are in society, and where you sit and where your friends are and what you want to do and how you want to do it. And then
you get comfortable.
Yeah, but then shit comes along, like your kids and your wife and your mortgage, and you're like, the status game isn't a priority. I know where I sit now. It's fine. I'm just going to look after my kid and feed it, because that's more important. Rather than posting next to this Ferrari or making people think. And I think some people just take it to the nth degree and extreme, where they lack perhaps maybe self-awareness, self-esteem, confidence, all those number of other things that maybe are some sort of deadly sin. And maybe.
To the second point, you made a good point about wearing the suit and learning from people on social media, like Casey Neistat, or for me it might be Ryan Holiday. He does a lot of Daily Stoic stuff. So I'm constantly learning from people like that, and that's something we could probably turn into, and I'm thinking out loud here, something that you could educate your kids on. So there's this dark side of social media, and it's not so good, and it can affect things like mental health and all that. But if you find the right type of people to follow, then you're going to end up becoming more knowledgeable, philosophical, stoic, whatever you want to do. So I think that's an interesting point, and there's probably pages Isla could follow, maybe. She's 7, so let's wait a couple of years. But
I think you can also realise your heroes.
Yeah.
Because the heroes have become a fantasy, right? Or they certainly were when I was a kid. You build up these characters, the books that you read, the Lance Armstrongs, the Muhammad Alis, I don't know any other number of these, but these are 2 examples of mine. And you build up this kind of like radio star picture in your head when you read their books, you read their Wikipedia pages, you read about them, you watch the YouTube videos about them, all that kind of stuff. So you kind of you get very much a snapshot perhaps of who they actually are. And you know what? I'm not naive to think that social media isn't necessarily a snapshot of who people are and what they do. But equally,
the highlight reel.
But equally, you get, perhaps maybe you even get a little bit less curated content. It's more what they want to post rather than what the PR agency says. So you can follow people like Will Smith. You can follow people...
Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah, Dwayne Johnson, those kind of people. Maybe there is a PR engine. Maybe I'm being completely naive and, there's a marketing thing behind it all. But I don't know. I feel more connected, or get a better understanding of who they are as an individual. Maybe it's not every single post. Maybe it's not every single thing that they'd put out there. But I feel like I could probably then categorise them more as a hero, perhaps, or certainly within that type of example range. Like a role model, if you want to call it that. Maybe I'm being naive again, and social media is just still casting that highlight reel over me. But you know what I mean? It's like,
when you see Dwayne Johnson, he's posting a video. He's saying he's finished his 2 a.m. workout. You kind of want to believe that this is him with his camera in the gym at 2 a.m. filming that.
Maybe
whether it's true or not,
that's
I don't know.
That's definitely probably again, there's a social status game going on there. It's like, look at me, look how great I am.
I don't take steroids.
But I mean, we don't want to get sued on the podcast, Neil, so we better just retract that statement. It'd be great, We'd probably make a great podcast if we said we got sued by Dwayne Johnson for saying that he was on steroids. But we didn't say you're on steroids. You definitely eat just chicken, rice, and broccoli 6 times a day, just for the record.
And he has this one cheat meal, day.
But I do get what you mean, and there's definitely a curated aspect of content. Of course, there is. But I don't know. There's something about it where you don't put people on pedestals as much, because you can start to understand, at least to a certain degree, who they are and where they come from and their backgrounds and what they say and what they don't say. But I suppose that's getting more and more foggy based on the fact that social media is such a massive behemoth, and more money is getting piled into influencers, and that's a stream of marketing. So maybe I'm naive to think that. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think looking into the future and what social media in 5-10 years' time, countries like China, which have got a lot of questionable laws and questionable regulations, they've got strict laws on social media and who can join it, and verifying your ID and what social media is out there and all that stuff. And to an extent, there's some of the aspects of that which I agree with. Like, why not age verify kids? Why not make sure they're 13 years old and not 7 years old on the TikTok platform? And also verify, and also another point I'm just going to make before you chip in is Facebook last week reported their first decline in 15 years. So is that a sign of things to come? I don't know. Are we slowly realizing that?
But it's not even the fact that we have a difficulty regulating the content that's produced, because we have like news outlets that are pretty horrible. Like the Daily Mail is a horror. If you look at the history of the Daily Mail, for example, it goes all the way back to extreme fascism, like anti-immigration, anti-Jewish. Like it's an awful newspaper, and it continues to do so. It continues to publish headlines which are disgusting. But that's not regulated. That's not stopped. They might get sued every so often by celebrities and stuff because they were phone tapping them or doing something like that. So I think social media will still continue to be just a different type of news outlet, right? You got freedom of the press. But it even goes beyond the idea, I think, of just being an age-restricted product. I think it should become... You should be identified and held accountable for the things that you do and you say.
Yeah.
You should have to submit your passport. You should have to submit your driving license. You should have to do something that identifies you as an individual, where you live, what you do, your age, your background, whatever it is. And I think that then slows down the ability to be able to create so much hate and racism and homophobia and sexism and all these kind of things, anti-Semitism, all these kind of things that are just horrible in the world. And if you are able to identify those individuals, I think you then quickly slow down the ability to create content that is horrible, that isn't good for both of our kids. So I don't know why that's not done. Like how difficult is that to implement? You can they can create bots within Facebook that essentially identify racist slurs and posts on certain things. I think it was quite recently. But they're suddenly unable to identify an individual who says those. They can just get away with it because they could just create another account. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's, but I think it is coming. So this is changing the subject a little bit, and it's starting to talk about pornography and stuff. And they're actually, by the end of this year, the UK are going to require pornography sites to age verify with a driving license or passport the people that view it. So there's now going to be a barrier to view it.
But that's websites, right? But that's not Facebook.
But I think it's the first step.
Yeah.
I think we're going to get that technology in place. So are we going to have a digital ID if you so choose?
I still think that this is bureaucratic nonsense. Like, this is just kind of... The layers are just too thick, where you have to go through this person and go through that person, and this person's funding has to be important, and that... Like, piss off. We have a media secretary, the one who runs like social media and whatever else, right? She stood up in this comments and said that she couldn't believe that young people watch the BBC on YouTube.
Wow.
Like, that is. I'm sorry, you're in charge of social media. Like, that's your thing. That's what you do. And you don't. You think it's amazing that teenagers watch the BBC on YouTube? So
it's going back to last year when Mark Zuckerberg was in front of the politicians in America, and they were asking him like
the Senate.
I'm trying to think of a question. Senate, yeah, asking ridiculous questions like how do people log in, and like how do people get access to Facebook and stuff.
I mean, this is a wildly off topic, but I mean. if we were in the city of London, Neil, and you know, like your company, right? If you wanted, you had a CEO of your company, would they work for £75,000 a year?
No, probably not.
No. And you would probably advertise the CEO, the chief executive role at a competitive salary because you want to attract talent to run the company, right?
Right.
So why are politicians paid £75,000 a year to run the country?
Is that episode number 7?
It could be, but I tell you now, if the social media secretary or whatever the hell, or media secretary or what the hell she is, if that was an actual job and she was like part of a company, she'd be paid £250,000 a year at least. And that would attract a different type of talent to someone who is so moronic and so dumb that they think that they're surprised that the teenagers watch the BBC on YouTube. Anyway, sorry, I've gone totally off the topic, but
I don't know what the point in our lifetime is going to be where they start regulating and they start looking at people's age. And
I don't know. I mean, if you look at smoking, you know, they used to have doctors like advertising smoking, right, back in the day. So you kind of think that it probably taken them about 50 years, 60 years, 70 years before people started suing tobacco companies for basically recommending that cigarettes and not telling them that it would give them cancer. It would give them cancer.
Yeah.
So I wonder, you know, in 50 years' time when we are 80, that children and teenagers of the time now will start suing social media companies, the billionaires that they've made of them, because it ruined their lives. It increased anxiety, it increased depression, it increased all sorts of issues.
Suicide. And
all that. Yeah. You know, is that what's going to happen? I don't know. I think I've had too much Merlot, I think is what's happening. And I'm going so far off piste, it's ridiculous. But I'm quite enjoying it, Neil. Carry on.
Yeah, it's been a good chat. But I think we should maybe wrap it up because we're getting to our 51 minutes. 52 minutes.
Right. We might. I think one day we might run over.
Time flies.
We might run over in these podcasts, but I think it's right to keep it like under an hour, right? I think it's probably a good idea.
Yeah, it was a good chat. It was interesting to hear your views, and we've obviously had different views, or not views, but different upbringings of social media. You took a very business approach. And I just went for the.
I think there was an element of being older as well. You know, like I started on social media when I was in my 20s, and that's a different brain to someone who is 10.
I was 17, 18, but yeah.
Even then, you were a bit older, but it's very different to someone who's 6.
Yeah.
You know, in the way that we see things and how we sort of formulate our status in the world.
We're delving off, but one of Rebecca's one of Isla's friends uploaded a vlog onto her mum's Facebook page.
Wow.
She's 6 years old.
I mean, I applaud the creativity because I can see that, you know, if you learn those skills, like if you learn self-defense pretty early on in the world and you become a black belt by the time you're 18, you know, that's pretty cool. So...
And I'm not criticising, and as long as those kind of control measures are in place and that kind of thing, let's encourage it. Isla loves videoing herself, sending you random photos.
Yes. And I love that too, but I think, you know, as we are now, my closing statement or comments would largely be around that we are in a position to guide our children, and we should continue to have open and frank conversations about and communication about social media and the implications that are ultimately there, because I don't think we can get rid of the bad things that happen. We aren't in politics, we aren't in high-end powers to be able to do that. But what we can do is talk to our children. I think we can talk to them about the things that are probably not good, that are bad, that they should maybe be aware of, that happen, and we just continue to talk to them about it and guide them through it. I don't think there's much we can do beyond that, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I think that was good. Good closing comments. In terms of episode 7, it's my turn to choose, but I was just looking through the list and I can't see one that's sticking out right now, so I'll give it some thought.
Have we already done biggest risks? Failed companies? Death? God, so who wrote death? Well, by the way, I
think it might have been you.
I think we're writing through. We're looking through this sort of podcast ideas list. I still really
failed company is an interesting one.
Failed company is interesting, but I am quite interested in getting to this idea of... I've written down an idea called the cliche of getting married and having kids and how bloody good it is. And that one's kind of about... Not so much about like birth stories and stuff, but it's about people who push against the idea that we should follow a path. You know, and that path of going to school, meeting your significant other, getting married, having children, getting a house, that's, you know, you don't have to follow that path. Oh, God forbid you follow that path. But, Christ, we followed both of it, and I love my life.
Yeah. No, let's go with that one then.
Oh, great. I'll get another bottle of Merlot, and we can crack off.
That could be a title for your next book, Gordon.
What, the cliche of getting...
You want to write a book?
The cliche of getting married and having kids and how bloody good it is.
By Gordon Greenhorn.
I'm a terrible writer. Like I said before, you know, we're 10 years down the line on my Facebook memories, and I still can't spell how you and you are. Neil.
Anyway, thanks for listening, everyone.
Yes, thank you. We're almost hit 300 downloads. I think we probably will surpass that by the time we get this one out. But should we launch this on Monday? That'll be Valentine's Day. I think it'd be quite nice.
Yeah.
So I hope everyone listening has a wonderful Valentine's Day. I hope you've enjoyed this little natter between me and Neil, social media one. It's one of my favourite ones again. Like, we keep having conversations that I really quite like. And this was a good one. I like this one. The birth stories, and then this one was some of my favourites. So, thanks, Neil.
Nice. Have a good weekend.
You too, and I'll see you in episode 7.
Goodbye.
Are you trying to feel like a cat? I was going to keep this rolling. Right, see you later, Neil.